At 5:23 a.m., Caribbean local time, 4 Venezuelan Air Force Su-30 Mk2 flanker jets roared off the runway at Barcelona airbase in tight combat formation. Each aircraft carried a pair of 6-110 kcal supersonic KK-31A anti-ship missiles, along with 4 R-73 air-to-air missiles for self-defense. The fighters accelerated down the 3,000-meter runway, reaching rotation speed, roughly 310 km/h, in just over 40 seconds. Their twin Saturn AL-31 FN turbofan engines slammed into full afterburner, pushing out a combined 245 kN of thrust, producing a roar intense enough to trigger seismic sensors up to 12 kilometers away. But to grasp the scale of what followed, you must understand, this story isn't about geopolitics or tactical brilliance. It's a second-by-second account of how a Venezuelan military operation, driven by flawed intelligence, misinterpreted directives, and catastrophic strategic judgment, resulted in a strike on a U.S. naval facility located on sovereign territory of a U.S. ally. The attack killed 34 American service members and triggered a retaliatory assault that wiped out 91% of Venezuela's air and naval power in under 96 hours from the first missile launch to unconditional surrender. To understand how events spiraled into irreversible disaster, we need to go back 11 days earlier, when Venezuelan military intelligence delivered a report claiming the United States was building a covert forward operations naval base on Curaçao, a Dutch territory just 65 kilometers off Venezuela's coast. The report, based on low-resolution commercial satellite imagery and unverified human sources, asserted that the U.S. had deployed 4 Harlech-Bork-class destroyers, 2 Virginia-class attack submarines, cruise missile storage facilities for Tomahawk missiles, and a marine detachment of 800 troops in Willemstad. The assessment labeled the deployment as preparation for a potential U.S. invasion. The primary evidence cited: increased U.S. military maritime traffic in the region in preceding weeks. Reality was far less dramatic. The U.S. had only set up a temporary logistics coordination post in Curaçao, approved by the Dutch government as part of anti-narcotics operations. The facilities hosted 47 military personnel, mostly analysts and logistical staff, and provided refueling support for vessels patrolling drug trade routes. There were no permanently stationed destroyers, no submarines, and no stored offensive weapons. Venezuelan analysts mistook routine naval movement for invasion prep, transforming a minor logistical presence into a supposed existential threat. President of Venezuela was briefed on November 3rd during a National Security Council session. According to leaked transcripts, he reacted with urgency, demanding options to neutralize the alleged threat before the U.S. might use Curaçao as a staging ground for aggression. Defense Minister General Ramon Silva presented an assessment that bordered on delusional. With our Su-30s equipped with 31 series missiles, we can neutralize the U.S. installations in Curaçao. A dawn strike, 8 missiles from a safe 80 kilometers distance, destroy docks, command centers and ships before they respond. The KK-31 at Mach 3.5 and sea-skimming altitude makes interception nearly impossible. What Silva omitted or strategically ignored were critical realities. Curaçao is Dutch territory, a NATO member. An attack would constitute aggression not only against the US, but the entire alliance under Article 5. Even if the initial strike succeeded, Venezuela had no means to withstand US retaliation. The intelligence foundation was deeply flawed. A preemptive attack with no provocation constituted a war crime and guaranteed international isolation. Silva, under pressure to justify massive prior investments in Russian military hardware, seemingly believed a dramatic show of force would elevate his standing. The president, facing domestic unrest after 15 years in power, saw an opportunity to rally nationalist support by creating an external enemy. After 2 hours and 34 minutes of discussion, he authorized the attack. Execute the operation within 72 hours. Maximum secrecy. I want complete success. 0 Venezuelan casualties. Operation planning was assigned to General Carlos Mendez, who chose 4 elite Su-30s based in Barcelona. Pilots ranged from 2,400 to over 10,000 flight hours, including advanced training in Russia. On November 13th, mission briefing assigned 3 target tiers: primary, Willemstad port, supposedly housing US destroyers; secondary, fuel storage sites supporting naval traffic; tertiary, a supposed US command center, actually the Dutch customs office; attack timeline, takeoff at 5:23, fly at 50 meter altitude to avoid radar, launch 8 missiles from 82 kilometers, egress at maximum speed, total mission 58 minutes. The plan appeared feasible only if its assumptions were true. They weren't. Unbeknownst to Venezuela, US infrared surveillance satellites detected the launches instantly, flagging abnormal flight paths and raising threat level. Within minutes, an E-2D Hawkeye radar aircraft detected the jets skimming low over the sea, confirming trajectory toward Curaçao. US command scrambled F-22 Raptors from Puerto Rico to intercept if hostile action confirmed. By 5:38 a.m., the Venezuelan strike group reached the designated launch point, 82 kilometers off the coast of Curaçao, still holding a razor-low altitude of roughly 50 meters above the sea. Torres, leading the formation, ordered lateral spacing of 3 kilometers to reduce the risk of multiple aircraft being hit if defense is engaged. He initialized targeting systems, confirming that both KK-31 missiles on each jet were receiving proper navigation data. He input coordinates for the supposed primary target, the port facilities where US destroyers were believed to be docked. Fire control computers calculated strike routes and displayed a time to impact of around 95 seconds from launch. On encrypted tactical comms, Torres issued the firing command. All units prepare to launch, weapons free, now. At 05:38:47, all 4 Su-30s released their missiles simultaneously. Each 610 kW warhead dropped momentarily before its ramjet ignited, propelling the missile to Mach 3.5, nearly 4,300 kilometers within seconds. The missiles descended to a sea-skimming cruise altitude of about 10 meters, following pre-programmed flight paths. At that speed, the 68-second flight window left virtually no reaction time for defenders. The jets immediately banked sharply, pushing throttles to maximum, and racing back toward Venezuelan airspace at extreme low altitude. But the United States had already detected the launch. Aboard the E-2D Hawkeye, radar operators tracked 8 new superspeed contacts heading straight for Willemstad. An urgent priority alert was issued. Confirmed missile launch, 8 sea-skimming contacts. Mach 3 pause, estimated impact in 60 seconds. On the ground in Curaçao, alarms sounded across the port zone. Personnel had already moved toward fortified shelters, but defensive capability was minimal, mainly heavy machine guns and portable Stinger launchers, neither suited to intercept hypersonic sea skimmer. At 05:39:55, the first missile struck. The warhead slammed into an empty concrete pier. The same pier intelligence insisted housed US destroyers. No warships had been stationed there. The blast tore a 40-meter gap in the structure, causing dramatic visuals, but no strategic damage. The second and third missiles ripped into fuel storage depots. Not American naval stockpiles, but Dutch facilities servicing local patrol vessels. The explosions triggered a massive blaze consuming 3 million liters of fuel over the next 8 hours, sending a plume of smoke visible from the Venezuelan coastline. The fourth missile smashed into a building identified as a US command center, actually the headquarters of the Dutch Port Authority. It killed 18 Dutch civilian employees, beginning the morning shift. Missiles 5 through 7 finally struck the area containing actual US personnel, killing 23 American service members and injuring 31 others. The 8th missile malfunctioned mid-flight, veered off course, and landed in a residential neighborhood 400 meters from its intended target, killing 11 Dutch civilians, 4 of them children, and destroying several homes. Venezuela had succeeded in causing lethal damage, but in all the wrong places. They had killed civilians, struck Dutch sovereign territory, and inflicted heavy casualties on US personnel. In doing so, they had triggered automatic NATO collective defense obligations under Article 5 and handed Washington an unassailable rationale for overwhelming retaliation. The 2 F-22 Raptors, launched earlier, did not arrive in time to stop the strike, but they were perfectly positioned to destroy the retreating Su-30s. At 05:40, tracking systems locked onto the fleeing Venezuelan jets. The American flight lead, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, requested engagement authorization. 4 hostile aircraft confirmed permission to engage lethal. Approval came in 12 seconds. Weapons free. Remove the threat. From high altitude, leveraging stealth concealment, Mitchell launched an AM-3020D AMRM from 85. The missile struck the trailing Su-30 in under a minute, tearing off its tail section. The pilot attempted to eject but failed. The wreckage plunged into the ocean. Remaining Su-30s dove even lower, dispersing countermeasures and flying erratically just meters above the waves. Mitchell and her wingman fired 3 more AMRMs in rapid succession.
A second jet was obliterated mid-air, killing the pilot instantly. A third was hit in the wing. That pilot ejected and later drifted at sea until Venezuelan rescue forces retrieved him hours later. Tories in the lead jet executed frantic evasive maneuvers, deploying flares, chaff and electronic jamming, while flying at 20 meters altitude. He evaded 2 missiles, but a third AMRM finally found its mark at 0546, destroying his aircraft. He ejected successfully and was recovered by local fishermen. In just 8 minutes, all 4 Venezuelan fighters were destroyed, 3 pilots killed, 1 severely injured. Venezuela's modern air fleet suffered catastrophic losses before it even re-entered home airspace. But those losses were trivial compared to what was coming next. At 0540, President was awakened and briefed Eve. Venezuelan aircraft launched 8 anti-ship missiles against Allied territory, causing US and Dutch casualties. 4 attacking aircraft have been eliminated. The Netherlands has invoked NATO Article 5. The President asked 3 rapid-fire questions. Was this intentional? Yes. Coordinated strike, planned targets. No sign of accident. 2. Do we have capability to eliminate Venezuelan military power? Absolutely. Within hours. 3. Recommendation. Full-spectrum response. Destroy their air and naval capacity entirely. Authorization was immediate. Initiate comprehensive military response. Neutralize Venezuela's offensive capability. Minimize civilian casualties. What followed was the largest US military strike in the Caribbean since. 6 B-52H bombers, each with 20 AGM-86 cruise missiles, launched from Louisiana. 4 B-1B bombers with JASSM payloads departed Florida. F-35 is armed with anti-radiation missiles took off from Puerto Rico. The USS Gerald Ford Carrier Group launched strike aircraft. 3 Virginia-class submarines and 2 Arleigh Burke destroyers prepared Tomahawk salvos. In total, over 280 precision-guided munitions began converging on Venezuelan military infrastructure from multiple directions, and the operation had only just begun.
At 11:30 a.m., exactly 6 hours after Venezuela launched its strike, the US initiated Operation Hammer of Justice. The first wave consisted of 120 AGM-86 cruise missiles launched from B-52H bombers, flying in international airspace more than 300 kilometers offshore. Flying at roughly 50 meters above sea level, the missiles slipped beneath radar coverage, while US electronic warfare aircraft jammed Venezuelan air defense networks, blinding them almost completely. Any radar systems that did activate were immediately targeted. F-35A fighters deployed AARGM anti-radiation missiles, destroying 14 fire control radars within the first 8 minutes, leaving Venezuela without means to guide surface-to-air interceptors. At 12:04 p.m., the first missile struck Venezuelan territory. Maracay Air Base, the heart of Venezuela's air force, was hit by 18 cruise missiles, shredding both runways, hangars, maintenance facilities, and the control tower. The base became inoperable within minutes. Barcelona Air Base, home of the Su-30 fleet used in the Curaçao mission, was hit by 16 missiles, destroying 5 remaining Su-30s still on the ground and leveling infrastructure. Barquisimeto Air Base lost all operational capacity after 14 impacts destroyed its runways, fuel depots, and shelters. La Carlota Air Base, located in Caracas and used for governmental defense operations, was struck by 12 missiles that wiped out helicopter capabilities and rendered the facility inert. Meanwhile, Venezuelan naval forces were decimated. Puerto Cabello Naval Base was hit by 38 missiles, sinking 4 frigates, destroying 2 coastal submarines under repair, and leveling shipyard facilities. La Guaira Naval Station lost 3 fast attack patrol craft and support buildings. Tucacas Naval Facility was bombarded by 10 missiles, crippling coastal operations. Within 40 minutes, Venezuela had lost Himxiuancao's 85% of its operational air bases and over 70% of its active fleet of surface vessels. But the barrage was far from over. At 12:47 p.m., a second wave launched, 48 Tomahawks from destroyers and 36 from submarines, targeting strategic command structures. 3 regional air command centers were obliterated, severing control over remaining forces. 8 long-range radar sites were destroyed, leaving the country effectively blind beyond a 30-kilometer radius. 6 ammunition depots detonated in massive fireballs, wiping out 70% of Venezuela's national munitions stockpile. 4 aviation fuel storage complexes were annihilated, eliminating 80% of jet fuel reserves. Casualties totaled over 2,200, most military personnel. though 127 civilians died due to bases located near residential zones. Economic losses exceeded 5 times Venezuela's annual defense budget. During the bombardment, the Venezuelan government attempted repeatedly to open communication channels to negotiate a ceasefire, but most communication infrastructure had been taken offline. Diplomatic channels through neutral embassies were overwhelmed. At 1:45 p.m., the Venezuelan ambassador to the UN finally delivered an emergency statement, acknowledging the attack on Curaçao as a catastrophic mistake, expressing regret, and requesting immediate mediation. But the message came after US operations had already achieved full mission objectives. At 2:30 p.m., Washington issued terms that amounted to near-total military surrender, dismantlement of Venezuela's combat air force, remaining aircraft surrendered for international destruction, reduction of naval forces to coastal patrol capability only, unlimited military inspections without restriction, $4.1 billion in reparations to the Netherlands and $890 million to the US, plus compensation for every American killed, prosecution of all commanders who planned the attack, minimum 25-year sentences. Facing the alternative, continued strikes or even foreign seizure of oil infrastructure, Venezuela accepted. At 4:20 p.m., the president of Venezuela announced his resignation in a national broadcast, admitting he had authorized the attack based on faulty intelligence. Senior military officials, including General Silva and General Mendez, were later tried and sentenced to decades in prison. Officers in intelligence and planning roles received sentences ranging from 12 to 30 years. Miguel Torres, the surviving pilot, received 15 years despite acting under orders. For families across the 3 nations involved, the conflict was a tragedy far beyond geopolitics. Americans killed were logistical staff working anti-narcotics missions, not combat personnel. Dutch casualties included civilian port workers and children living near impact sites. Nearly 1,000 Venezuelan service members died defending bases they had no warning or chance to evacuate. Post-war analysis identified systemic failures within Venezuela. Intelligence misread routine logistics as invasion staging. National leaders made decisions without strategic consultation. Military culture prioritized loyalty over competence. Strategic assumptions ignored asymmetry of power. No diplomatic safeguards or alliances existed to buffer retaliation. For the US, Tomatrice, the operation was studied as a case of overwhelming deterrent force applied with high precision, not aimed at regime change, but at rendering future aggression impossible. For the world, the incident became a definitive cautionary tale, how misinterpreting threats paired with political desperation and military delusion can destroy a nation in less than a week. For Venezuela, the aftermath reshaped the country's trajectory for decades. The nation lost nearly all capacity to project military power beyond its borders, becoming dependent on neighboring states for external security. Internationally, it became emblematic of reckless escalation, known as the country whose leadership launched an attack on a NATO ally based on misinterpreted intelligence, resulting in overwhelming and humiliating defeat. Political turmoil followed. The government fell, leading to constitutional reforms aimed at preventing presidents from authorizing major offensive operations without legislative oversight or international consultation. Economic recovery slowed as billions were diverted to reparations rather than development and public needs. Diplomatic isolation persisted until a newly formed government committed to international norms and cooperation. For military institutions around the world, the incident became a foundational case study, not on how to conduct war, but on how not to. It demonstrated how defective intelligence combined with political pressure and overconfidence can lead small and mid-tier powers into irreversible catastrophe. It became a reference point in war colleges on how intelligence must be multi-sourced and independently verified, how asymmetry of force renders limited tactical victories meaningless, how striking territory of an alliance member triggers escalation beyond national control, how political desperation corrupts military judgment, how strategic decisions must account for second and third-order consequences. For the United States and NATO, the operation reinforced long-standing principles of collective defense. It validated that Article 5 was not merely symbolic. Aggression against one member would mobilize unified retaliation. It also demonstrated the power of modern warfare, that precision strike capabilities, satellite tracking, airborne radar networks and global communications can neutralize conventional militaries in hours rather than weeks, even if those militaries achieve temporary tactical success. The broader international community saw the conflict as a harsh reminder that preemptive use of force outside legitimate self-defense is not just illegal, it is suicidal for nations without overwhelming power, alliances or strategic depth. The incident reinforced norms against first-strike aggression and highlighted how quickly global surveillance assets can detect hostile actions. In a world where missiles fly faster than decisions can be reconsidered, the Venezuelan conflict became a warning etched into foreign policy briefings, military academies, and intelligence manuals. Power is not measured by what a nation can attempt, but by what it can survive. And in this case, a nation gambled everything on a phantom threat and lost almost everything in return.